Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive.
It's great to be back.
Yeah, today we're going to dive into something that seems a little counterintuitive,
Definitely.
and that is toxic positivity.
Mm.
Now, we all know that being positive is generally,
Yeah,
a good thing, right?
absolutely.
But it turns out that there can be too much of a good thing,
Right.
like almost anything.
Exactly.
And that's what we're exploring today. We're going to be looking at some excerpts from a document that talks about toxic positivity and kind of breaks it down.
I think this will be really helpful for people.
I do too, because a lot of us have probably experienced this,
Yeah.
where someone's like, oh, just be positive or look on the bright side or,
Yeah, or like everything happens for a reason.
Exactly right. And sometimes that can feel good, but sometimes it can feel a little,
Like dismissive.
a little dismissive or like it's minimizing what you're going through.
Right.
So that's what we're going to unpack today.
Sounds.
So how about we start with what is toxic positivity? How do we even define that?
So I think it's helpful to contrast it with healthy optimism, right?
Yeah.
Because optimism in itself is not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
It's actually, been linked to all sorts of positive outcomes.
Right, like resilience and,
Exactly. Yeah.
just better health overall.
But toxic positivity takes it too far. I think the document that we're looking at defines it as this insistence on maintaining a positive mindset no matter what's happening, no matter how difficult the situation is.
Yeah, and that's what really makes it toxic, is that it's like this
It's extreme.
Yeah,
it's like this unrelenting
right. And it's also,
push pressure.
it could be very invalidating.
Absolutely.
It can make you feel like your feelings
I'm
are
not allowed to
allowed or valid.
feel what you're feeling.
Right. And the document actually gives some really good examples of what this sounds like.
Yeah, I thought those were really helpful.
Yeah, like just think happy thoughts.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic one.
Yeah. That sounds so simple.
Yeah. And, I think sometimes people say that with good intentions. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
cheer up.
Yeah.
But it's not that easy.
Yeah, when you're dealing with something really difficult
Exactly. Like if you're grieving.
or you've lost your job or you're going through a breakup. I mean, these are things that,
Yeah, there's real pain there.
there's real pain, and it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and...
Exactly. And it's important to allow yourself to feel those feelings.
Right.
Because that's part of the healing process.
Yeah, it's like if you have a physical injury, you don't just pretend it's not there.
Exactly. You have to address it.
Right, you have to,
Take care of it.
take care of it, allow it to heal.
And it's the same with emotional pain.
Absolutely. Another one that the document talks about is, everything happens for a reason.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that one a lot.
Yeah. And again, it's like, I think people say it to try to be helpful.
Yeah, they're trying to offer comfort.
Right. But when you're in the midst of something really painful, it can be really hard to see that reason.
Absolutely. And I think it can also put this pressure on people to find the silver lining
Right. Immediately.
right away when maybe they're not ready for that.
Yeah. You need to process. You need to,
Grieve.
grieve and go through those stages.
And it's okay to not know why something happened.
Yeah. Sometimes there isn't a reason, or, that the reason is really complex and
Yeah.
not something that you can easily grasp.
And I think it can also be invalidating to people's pain to say that, oh, there's a reason for this.
Yeah. It can feel like,
It's minimizing.
minimizing what they're going through.
Like their pain doesn't matter.
Right. And then another one that I think a lot of people have probably heard is, others have it worse, so you shouldn't feel bad.
Oh, yeah. That's a tough one.
The comparing suffering, which is
Never helpful.
never helpful.
Just because someone else is going through something more difficult doesn't mean that your pain is invalid.
Right. Everyone's experience is unique and valid.
And we need to honor that.
Yeah. So those are just some examples. But I think it illustrates that core idea that toxic positivity is about this dismissal of genuine emotion.
Right. It's like we're not allowed to feel those negative emotions.
Right. And it's like, just slap a happy face on it and keep going.
Right. And that's not healthy?
Yeah. It's not healthy at all. And so that's kind of what we're going to get into next is like, what are the actual consequences
Yeah. What's the impact of this?
of this toxic positivity on our mental health?
Like what happens when we keep pushing those feelings down?
Yeah, because it's not like they just go away.
No, they don't. They fester.
They fester. Yeah.
And they can come out in other ways.
Right. And the document talks about this. It says that, one of the things that can happen is increased stress and anxiety.
It makes sense, right? Because if you're not dealing with your emotions in a healthy way,
Yeah.
they're going to build up.
It's like a pressure cooker. Like you're keeping the lid on, but eventually,
It's going to explode.
yeah. Or,
Yeah.
it might leak out in ways that
In unhealthy ways.
unhealthy ways, right?
Yeah.
So That's one thing. And then another thing that the document talks about is emotional invalidation, which we kind of touched on earlier. But it's this idea that when your feelings are constantly dismissed, you start to feel like
they're not important.
Yeah, or like
you're wrong for feeling them.
Right. And that can lead to people withdrawing.
Absolutely.
From others, because they're like, well, why bother sharing if
no one's going to listen?
If no one's going to listen, or if they're just going to tell me,
be positive.
Be positive, right?
And that can be really isolating.
Yeah, and then that can lead to, even more problems.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
Right, and then the document also talks about unhealthy coping mechanisms. So when we don't deal with our emotions in a healthy way, we might turn to other things.
Like substance abuse.
Yeah, or,
Overeating,
or, other things that are
not good for us in the long run.
Yeah, that are not good for us in the long run. And it can also lead to physical health problems.
Right, because our mental and physical health are connected.
Yeah.
So if we're not taking care of our mental health, it's going to affect our physical health as well.
Yeah, and then finally the document talks about strained relationships.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because if you're not able to be authentic with people.
Yeah.
And share your true feelings.
Then you're not really connecting on a deep level.
Right. It's all surface level. And, and if you're constantly, being positive and brushing things off, it can make people feel like they can't come to you with their problems.
Right, because they're afraid of being judged. Or
dismissed, right. So it can really damage relationships.
Absolutely.
So it's really important to be mindful of this toxic positivity and how it can impact not just ourselves, but also our relationships with others.
I think that's a great point.
So we've talked about what toxic positivity is. We've talked about the negative consequences of it.
Yeah.
Now, the good news is that there are things we can do about it.
Yes, absolutely.
The document actually provides some really helpful strategies.
Yeah, this is like the practical advice.
The practical advice, yeah. So let's dive into that.
Okay.
So first and foremost, the document emphasizes acknowledging all emotions.
All of them.
All of them.
The good, the bad, the ugly.
Right. It's saying that, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel frustrated.
These are normal human emotions.
They're normal human emotions. Yeah. We're not robots.
We're not supposed to be happy all the time.
Right. And I think a lot of us have been conditioned to think that we need to be positive all the time.
Yeah, like there's something wrong with us if we're not.
Right. And that's just not true.
Not true at all.
So the first step is really just allowing ourselves to feel whatever we're feeling.
Without judgment.
Without judgment.
Just acknowledging it.
Yeah. And, and this might sound simple, but it can actually be really challenging.
It can be because we're so used to pushing those feelings down.
Yeah. So it takes practice.
It does, but it's worth it.
Yeah, because once you start acknowledging your emotions, then you can start to process them in a healthy way.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next thing that the document talks about is validating, don't dismiss. And it gives this really great example. It says, instead of saying, just be happy.
Which is so common.
Which is so common, right?
Like, oh, just cheer up.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
Not that simple, right?
It's actually much more helpful to say something like,
I hear you.
I hear you, and it's okay to feel this way.
Yeah, and that's so powerful because it's acknowledging the person's experience.
It is.
You're not telling them that they shouldn't feel that way.
You're not minimizing their feelings.
Yeah, right.
You're validating them.
You're validating them, and that makes such a huge difference.
It does.
And it also opens up the door for communication.
Absolutely.
Because now the person feels like they can actually talk to you about what they're going through.
Right, they feel safe.
Yeah. So that's really important, and this applies to both how we talk to others.
And how we talk to ourselves.
And how we talk to ourselves, right? Yeah. So be kind to yourself.
Absolutely. Practice self-compassion.
Yes, self-compassion is huge.
Yeah.
And then another strategy that the document talks about is allowing yourself to sit with discomfort.
This is a hard one.
It is hard, but it's so important.
It is.
Because we live in a society that's all about, quick fixes.
Yeah, we want instant gratification.
Right, we want to get rid of the discomfort as quickly as possible.
But sometimes that's not possible.
Yeah, and sometimes it's actually not helpful.
Right.
Because sometimes we need to just feel those feelings.
And process them.
Process them and allow them to run their course.
And sometimes just sitting with those feelings can be enough to start to feel better.
Yeah, it's like, if you have a physical injury, sometimes you just need to rest.
Exactly.
You can't just, keep pushing yourself.
You can just ignore it.
You can't just ignore it. You have to allow it to heal.
And sometimes the healing process is uncomfortable.
Yeah, but it's necessary.
It is.
And the same is true for emotional pain.
Absolutely.
So allow yourself to sit with that discomfort.
Don't try to push it away.
Yeah, and this might mean, crying or journaling or just, sitting quietly with your thoughts.
Whatever works for you.
Whatever works for you. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
And I think it's important to remember that you don't have to do it alone.
Right. That brings us to the next point, which is seeking support from non-judgmental listeners.
Yeah, having a supportive network is so crucial.
It is. And this might be, friends, family, a therapist.
Yeah, anyone who you feel safe with.
Anyone who you feel safe with and who will just listen.
Without judgment.
Without judgment, without offering unsolicited advice.
Just a listening ear.
Yeah. And, sometimes just having someone to talk to can make a world of difference.
It can.
It can really help you to process those emotions and to feel less alone. And then finally, the document talks about the importance of practicing self-compassion.
Yeah, this is huge.
This is huge. And it's basically about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer to a friend.
Exactly.
So if you're going through a tough time,
don't beat yourself up.
Don't beat yourself up. Be kind to yourself.
It's okay to not be okay.
It's okay to not be okay. And, and I think sometimes we're our own worst critics.
We are.
So it's really important to be mindful of that inner voice and to make sure that it's a supportive voice.
A compassionate voice.
Yeah, a compassionate voice.
Because we all deserve that.
We all deserve that, absolutely. So those are some of the key strategies that the document highlights for moving towards emotional authenticity.
Yeah. I think those are really helpful.
I do too. And I think, it's important to remember that this is a journey.
It's not a destination.
It's not a destination.
Yeah.
You're not going to wake up one day and suddenly be perfectly emotionally authentic.
It takes time and practice.
It takes time and practice, and it's an ongoing process.
Yeah. But it's worth it.
It's worth it because ultimately it leads to greater well-being.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing that you really want our listeners to take away from this conversation about toxic positivity?
I think the most important takeaway is that it's okay to not be okay. We don't have to be positive all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, it's not healthy to try to be positive all the time.
Right.
It's important to allow ourselves to feel the full range of human emotions.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge those emotions without judgment.
Yeah.
And to seek support when we need it.
Absolutely.
And to remember that we're not alone in this.
Right. Everyone experiences difficult emotions.
It's everyone.
And it's part of being human.
It is.
So I think that's a really important message, and I hope that our listeners will take that to heart.
Me too.
And on that note, I think it's a good idea for all of us to reflect on times when we might have, either experienced toxic positivity or maybe even perpetuated it unintentionally.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, because I think we've all been there at some point.
We all have.
And it's not about blaming ourselves. It's about
learning and growing.
Learning and growing, exactly. And so by becoming more aware of toxic positivity and its impact,
we can start to make changes.
We can start to make changes in our own lives and in our interactions with others.
And create a more supportive and compassionate world.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something to think about as you go about your day and maybe even have some conversations with people about this.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah, because the more we talk about this, the more we can raise awareness and hopefully start to shift the culture away from this toxic positivity and towards a more authentic and accepting way of being.
I think that's a great goal.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah, I hope you found it helpful, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.